Britain's top 10 castles and palaces. A fascinating journey through these ancient buildings explores their mysteries and reveals secrets and surprises. Did King Arthur, his Knights of the Round Table, and Merlin the Magician live on this remote headland by the sea? How were battles fought in the age of chivalry?
You can slash, punch, hook under a man's chin and tear his lower jaw out.
Which castle is notorious for its botched executions?
It took several strokes before his head was off. At one point, he actually got up and said, you know, can't you do any better than this?
Find out the answers to all these strange and wonderful questions and more in Britain's top 10 castles and palaces. Windsor Castle, 900 years old. The largest occupied castle in the world. The oldest official royal residence in the world. And it's the Queen's weekend home, just 20 miles west of London. Here at Windsor, Prince Charles and Princess Diana would visit the Queen and would bring their sons William and Harry from their earliest years. Architectural splendor, rich history, and the chance to see royalty make Windsor number 10 in Britain's top 10 castles and palaces. Windsor Castle is more like a town than a castle, containing homes for scores of people, a large church, and of course, a royal palace.
I think a lot of people forget that it is actually a palace. It has always been a favourite residence for most of the monarchs, and the present family spend a lot of time in Windsor. The Queen loves the countryside, of course. She doesn't particularly like living in cities. She spends most weekends at Windsor.
One of the oldest ceremonies in the world takes place at Windsor Castle. Every June, the Knights of the Garter gather at Windsor.
It's the oldest order of chivalry in the world. You have the monarch, you have the Prince of Wales, who's automatically a Knight of the Garter, plus 24 knights.
But in 1992, Windsor Castle was nearly lost. In a few hours, a simple wiring problem turned centuries of British history into ashes.
The fire completely destroyed 105 rooms. 1.5 million gallons of water was used to try and contain the fire.
Many valuable works of art perished, but many others were saved. Prince Andrew, the Queen's middle son, helped save the castle's priceless contents.
The fire was burning at approximately $60,000 a minute.
It raged into the night. It took 15 hours to extinguish it completely. St. George's Hall was ruined. The ceiling and one whole wall were destroyed. Before the fire, this was where the Queen hosted state banquets.
The drying out process took 2 years, so in that 2 years, no renovation work at all could actually take place. And the actual renovation cost approximately $60 million to complete.
The restoration took 5 years of painstaking work, the greatest project of its type in the 20th century. Only authentic materials and traditional techniques of craftsmanship were used.
The Crimson Drawing Room would be used by the Queen to entertain guests. Foreign dignitaries, ambassadors, monarchs from Europe, and presidents, of course.
Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and Bill Clinton have all been guests of the Queen at the palace inside Windsor Castle. Much of the palace is now as it was before the fire. But in some rooms, new designs have been incorporated. 2 stained glass windows were based on sketches by the Duke of Edinburgh. Now the restoration is complete, and Windsor Castle is as glorious as ever. Many think it has even been improved. Over 1 million people now visit the castle every year, just as before. Hampton Court, like Windsor, just a few miles from London on the banks of the River Thames. This magnificent 1,000-room palace is world famous as the home of Henry VIII. The ghost of one of his wives is said to stalk its corridors to this day. Guides in period costumes take you back in time through history, and will even show you a king's other throne. Breathtaking architecture, royal ghosts, and fascinating historical oddities make Hampton Court number 9 in our countdown of Britain's top 10 castles and palaces. Hampton Court's most famous owner was Henry VIII. Its most famous ghost is that of one of his wives. Henry had 6 wives and beheaded 2 of them. At the age of 49, Henry had already been married 4 times. In 1540, he took wife number 5, Catherine Howard. She was perhaps only 15 years old at the time of her marriage, an age difference of over 30 years. Before long, Catherine was accused of adultery and imprisoned in the palace. But one day she broke free and ran along the gallery to try to beg for mercy from Henry. She was caught and dragged kicking and screaming back to imprisonment. Catherine Howard was tried for treason. The verdict was inevitable. Ever since, the gallery through which Catherine had been dragged screaming has been known as the Haunted Gallery.
People often complain in this gallery that they feel rather cold, even in the height of summer. And several people have even fainted in this gallery, or heard a cry or a moan. And they do say that this is the ghost of Catherine Howard.
Hampton Court is also surrounded by gardens of every kind, offering vistas stretching down to the River Thames. One of the most beautiful is the Privy Garden, the private garden of Hampton's kings and queens. By the early 1990s, the Privy Garden was overgrown and untidy. It has now been restored to its splendid 300-year-old design. History envelops visitors to Hampton Court, but the palace has more to offer than just history. The most famous maze in the world has been losing and confusing people at Hampton Court for over 300 years. Nearly 1/3 of a million people pass through it every year, or don't. The maze was planted in the same year that a whole new wing at Hampton Court was built in the Baroque style of the day by King William III. And here, a strange custom grew up. A favored and honored few of the king's subjects were allowed to see the king at his bedtime.
You would watch his gentleman of the bedchamber undress him in the evening and put him to bed, or if you came in the morning, you could watch him get out of bed and being dressed.
And one man got even nearer to the king than that. Sir Henry Sidney, Earl of Romney, could stand by his man at the most delicate of moments in the most private room of all.
And for that, he earned £1,500 a year. It was a best paid job at court. His title was the Groom of the Stool.
The Groom of the Stool, the man who waited on his master more than just hand and foot. Coming up next, the castle that holds the Scottish crown jewels. But why are 2 of the Beatles repairing them?